It's difficult in the conservation sector sometimes to engage appropriately and differently with those who are working outside. We use a lot of language and words to try to articulate the complex issues facing our natural world. We know because of science what the issues are that are facing the environment, what the crises are. We even know what to do. But sometimes we have a problem and we can't feel the issues. We don't know how to emote. We don't know how to understand. And for me, that's where art and the visual arts, sculpture, painting, and music and sound become absolutely vital in terms of what we're trying to do. I'm Jessica Sweidan, the founding trustee of Synchronicity Earth, a charitable foundation that provides funding for the most important conservation initiatives globally, acting as an ambassador, mentor, and agent to others to halt and reverse environmental degradation. Together with Invisible Dust, Alice Sharp, and Monica Chung, who have curated this exhibition, we are delighted to welcome you all tonight to Disappearing Nature, Artists Supporting Life on Earth. We have an amazing array of artists who have given us pieces for tonight's exhibition. And just because I think we should just actually think about who they are, and I'm going to say their names. Zana Brisky, Marcus Coates, Adam Chotko, Jeremy Deller, Dan Holdsworth, Tanya Kovacs, Alice Shirley, Robin Moore, and Mariel Neudecker. It's quite an extraordinary group of people, and Invisible Dust have done an amazing job working with all of them, hanging this beautiful exhibition, and working with Gallery 8 tonight.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here talking to you all. And Jessica has, in conceiving of biophilia, actually had quite a profound intuition, which I'm going to try and pad out. I'm not sure she's quite aware of the extent to which what she's doing here is something that echoes deep, deep, deep into the human consciousness. My work with hunter-gatherer peoples around the world, but particularly in the Congo Basin, has led to me really being quite interested in how they understand their relationship to nature. And I think that that's something which I'll share with you briefly, and in a brief conversation with Marcus just before, he's going to talk about in a very similar way. And I think that the similarities between what we're all going to be saying to you actually reinforce the extraordinary synchronicity of biophilia happening now. It really is something that's crucial for the Western world to rekindle and reawaken in itself if we're to find solutions for the extraordinary, difficult and complex problems that we face in the 21st century. The particular conceptions that I want to talk about today, though, are animism and totemism, because I think that they actually offer us a very interesting pathway to reconnecting with this complex weave and tapestry of living beings. And animism is a form which is almost the sort of default religion of humanity. And it's based on the idea that we read personality or intention in other creatures. So when we see a bird fly in a particularly unusual way, we read some sort of intention into that bird's flight. But essentially what animists are trying to do is to reconnect themselves through the universal life force that animates all creatures that live. And so even the act of killing is not an act of destruction, it's an act of transformation where the life force that holds, that is contained within the body of the moose I've just killed is then transferred into my children as they grow and my family as it becomes strong. And within these animistic worlds, the process of engaging with nature is one of creating a dialogue, a conversation with those other natural kinds. And those conversations are created, surprise, surprise, through painting. They're created through song. They're created through storytelling. They're created through what we here call the arts.
Hi, I'm Marcus, Marcus Coates. This is my piece of work here, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that later. But really, it's amazing actually hearing Jerome talk there about traditional culture and our relationship to nature and how that rings true with a lot of the work I've been making. When I've been doing a lot of travelling over the past 10 years, and I went to the Amazon, the Ecuadorian Amazon, and stayed with a group of people called the Warani people, and just went around with the hunters and spent time with them. And it became so obvious, and actually any indigenous people I've stayed with, it seems so obvious that they refer to the outside world and their surroundings in a way that talks about themselves. So a particular tree, they see themselves in that tree somehow. Or a jaguar, for example, that's their ancestors are in that cat, so they'll never kill that. There's a part of themselves in everything around them. And that, in a way, establishes this sense of respect. And also this thinking about what killing or destroying or using or any of these attachments that humans have, it mediates all of that and makes all that very necessary and important. And I think culture, our culture particularly, doesn't serve us very well. I think it's transformed into lots of different ways. I think perhaps instead of relationships with species, we have relationships with brands, for example. I think indigenous societies and the knowledge they have, I firmly believe that's what we need to learn from now. That's where the understanding is. This is called Self-Portrait as Worcestershire, and it's a meadow in Worcestershire where I used to live, and I'm buried in this pit down here, and I've got a shutter release in my hand. I took the picture myself. So in a way, it's really taking that idea of seeing ourselves in nature, or seeing, sort of making our identity partial in a way. So we're not totally autonomous. We're not just fulfilled and we haven't got this screen around us. We can be in other things. We can see ourselves in other things. We can see ourselves in that tree or that grass or that soil. We can be part of something else. And as Jerome says, we can see the bird flying over, and we can understand its intentionality because we can empathise with it, and we can attempt to become it and see through its eyes and understand what it's doing. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you very much.
This exhibition is launching a campaign that supports two initiatives: 50 years of the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, which you'll hear more about shortly, and Synchronicity Earth.
So the Red List was started by a bunch of visionaries, people who sadly are no longer with us, and mostly British people. The Red List is an independent list. It's a list made by scientists, and it is peer-reviewed. That means something we use in the scientific world. That means one lot of scientists do the work and another lot of scientists check it to make sure they did it correctly. They follow the rules. They work out correctly how threatened a species is, how close to extinction or not. And so that's its value. So it's independent from any other list of threatened species. And there are lists of species that governments have for wildlife protection, etc. And that's fine as well. But our list is the scientifically independent one, and it's used around the world. And we have, how many species? 74,000 species in it, roughly. I've got my minders here who are going to correct me. Mike and Rachel here will correct me if anything is wrong. And of those 74,000, about 20,000, about nearly 21,000 are threatened with extinction, and about over 800 actually are extinct. So that, and this is only a small sample of the total number of species in the world. About 1.8 million, 1.9 million species have actually been named by scientists. No one knows how many species there actually are, but it's probably in the order of 5 to 15 million, something like that, maybe more. And so our plan is to turn the Red List into what we call the barometer of life, which is, we think we need to look at the status of about 160,000 species to represent life on Earth properly. And so that's our plan, and in a sense that's our sort of campaign for this year in the 50th anniversary.
And certainly within my career as an artist, I've really benefited from a whole string of scientists that have opened their door to me and allowed me to be curious, and have enjoyed my curiosity because I'm free of some of the rules that they operate under. And my outcomes don't have to be proved in the same way as their outcomes do. So I think sometimes when you put an artist and a scientist together, you often provide a sort of vent for the scientific imagination that might not always be permitted. whereas the artist is permitted to be curious and get information. So they can often be very fruitful marriages. It's very difficult to get one obsessive to understand another obsessive. So, you know, there are differences. I think they share the curiosity to keep going and the tenacity to stick at their obsessions, and also that desire to prove their obsession in some way and communicate it. It's just the forms are very different, but that desire to communicate what they find is there and shared, and that kind of compulsion to follow something through to a point of proof is certainly within both practices. It's just the forms are completely different.
So I completely respect scientists, and I understand the focus and obsession, because I have that. But it's a very different way of seeing the world or experiencing the world. I mean, I think a lot of scientists would call me crazy if a lot of people would call me crazy. But you could put, I'm fascinated by different species of praying mantises because they have different, and I will use the word personalities. You could put 10 individuals of the same species in front of me and they are different for me. And so I'm trying to relate to an individual being and portray that in my work, and respect, my level of respect is for that individual.
Almost every one of us went in to study natural history, science, because we love animals, we love plants, we love nature, we love landscapes. It's so that's almost always the driving force behind it. And people don't generally stay the course unless they have some sort of passion, a deeper passion. And that seems to me, I presume, very similar to the sorts of things we heard hearing from Zana just now. And so the way that expresses, whether you do it Zana's way, whether you do it the way of the scientist, it's probably to do with how you're wired. But it doesn't matter, does it? We probably need both. Yeah. So the big problem with conservation, the big problem is not that it doesn't work, which is what certain people will tell you, but we don't do anything like enough of it.